and hopefully you can see my screen now. Apologies for a little bit of technical difficulties. So once again, this is for WellbeingAid. Thank you for joining us for the Nutrition Bites mini webinar 1, which is called What is a Whole Food Plant-Based Diet and How You Can Try It. So let's go ahead and move forward. I'm just going to tell you in a moment what is WellbeingAid. It's an organization that strives to empower individuals to lead healthier and more fulfilling lives through evidence-based practices and sustainable lifestyle choices. So as I mentioned a bit earlier, my name is Maria Cecilia Mosquera. I am a public health preventive medicine physician, pediatrician, lifestyle medicine physician, obesity medicine physician with a certification in culinary coaching. But what that means is I'm basically a lifestyle medicine doctor who likes to help people optimize their well-being. And that's why I'm speaking to you today about what is a whole food plant-based diet and how you can try it on behalf of WellbeingAid. So thank you for joining us. We are doing these 2 mini webinars today on the occasion of March as Nutrition Month, and because the 4th of March was World Obesity Day, and I'm going to be mentioning obesity in one moment. So today's first session is going to be for about 30 minutes. We are going to be dividing this in 3 parts. The first is we're going to talk about what is a whole food plant-based way of eating. And in the second part, I'm going to be sharing some practical tips to help you move forward and try it. In the last part, we're going to be answering any questions if you have some. So feel free to write your questions in the chat box. If you have any, I'll be watching the chat box to see. In the end, I'll also give some time for questions. And you can see the learning objectives for this session on this slide. So this session is being recorded because it's being done on Facebook Live. In case you are missing it or can't catch all of it, you'll be able to watch it later. So let's start with the first part of this session, which is what is a whole food plant-based diet? So maybe you've heard after, New Year's resolutions in January, people started trying to think about potentially veganuary. So maybe you've heard of vegan diets, the Mediterranean diet, people that call themselves flexitarian, vegetarian. Maybe you've heard people say plant forward, plant strong, whole food plant-based, no salt, no oil or no sugar. There's a lot of ways in which people are trying to maximize the way that they eat plants to nourish themselves. So specifically today we're going to be talking about what is a whole food plant-based diet, and it's basically one in which you eat mostly plants, which includes vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds that are minimally processed. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment, but you can see an image on the screen right now from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine that shows that most of your plate, half of it actually is fruits and vegetables, about a quarter is plant proteins like let's say beans, nuts, or tofu or tempeh, and the other quarter is whole grains. So if we're talking about why are we eating mostly plants, we have to discuss what the benefits are. So there is evidence in the research that shows us that once you shift from some animal-based foods to more plant-based foods, this lowers your chance of actually developing heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and of dying. It improves your weight in relationship to, for example, obesity, which is why we're mentioning this on the occasion of World Obesity Day. It improves your blood pressure. So for example, if you have high blood pressure or hypertension, you can actually help normalize your blood pressure by shifting to a mostly whole food plant-based diet or something like the Mediterranean diet, which we're going to talk about. And these eating mostly plants improves your glucose or hemoglobin A1C, which is what we check when we diagnose somebody with type 2 diabetes or prediabetes. So you can actually improve your obesity, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and prevent or lower your chance of getting heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and of dying the more plants you eat. So that's part of why we're talking about this today. And this is meant to be an eating pattern. If you notice in today's session, I put diet in quotation marks because it's really not meant to be a diet. It's meant to be a pattern of eating, the way that you eat, and it's meant to be long-term. So we're going to talk about that in just a moment. So, what are some plant based eating patterns? Well, I've mentioned the Mediterranean diet. It's probably one about which you've heard. There is the original Mediterranean diet, which is what I'm referring to when I discuss a whole food plant based diet, which was high in vegetables, fruits, legumes, nuts, beans, cereals, grain, fish, and unsaturated fats, specifically olive oil and olives, and it was low in meat and dairy foods. So this may not be what everybody in the Mediterranean is doing right now, but that was the original Mediterranean diet that has shown such benefit in the research. There are other vegetarian diets that would call themselves plant-based or focused on plants, like people who say they're pescatarian, who eat seafood, but for example, no meat or poultry, or those who eat eggs and milk, who would call themselves lacto-ovo vegetarian. There are also people that you've probably heard about that call themselves vegans, that they don't eat any animal food products, and many times they choose this for ethical reasons. But what I'm mentioning today is specifically is a whole food plant-based diet, which just means you eat mostly minimally processed plants. And you may have heard, if you've already delved into the realm of the whole food plant-based way of eating, that some people actually decide not to eat any added salt, oil, or sugar. So when we start talking about eating mostly plants, many times people get concerned, particularly, and ask, does this mean that I have to give up meat and become vegan? Well, not necessarily. We're talking about today ways that you can move towards maximizing the amount of plants that are in your diet that can help nourish you and help benefit your health, and move away from the types of diets that we know that can cause things like heart disease, high blood pressure, and diabetes, such as the standard American diet. But this is a spectrum. People choose what they're ready to choose for the changes that they want to make. So, for example, somebody might call themselves whole food plant-based, but they eat mostly plants, and for them that might mean 80% of the week. Other people might say 90% of the week. Other people are 100% whole food plant-based, so they eat minimally processed whole foods that come from plants all the time. But that's up to you. You get to choose, but we want to present to you what this means, how you can move towards it, and give you some practical ideas. So no, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to give up meat. Just know and think about that. The more plants you have in your diet, in your week, in your eating pattern, the better your health will be. Plus, when we talk about a whole food plant-based way of eating, it's not necessarily the same thing as being vegan. You can be vegan and eat junk food or highly processed food, and you can eat junk food or highly processed food all the time. That depends on you as an individual. So being whole food plant-based is not the same necessarily as being vegan. So I'm going to talk about what I mean by processed foods, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see a rectangle that's around this area that says unprocessed. So we categorize food into 4 different categories: unprocessed, minimally processed, processed, or ultra processed. So unprocessed foods are ones that came straight from nature, like the carrot or the apple or the bell pepper that you see on the picture here. When we talk about something being minimally processed, it's been slightly altered for preservation. For example, if you take a nut from a tree, like an almond, and you dry it, that might be minimally processing it. Or you take some chopped onions and you freeze them. That's minimally processing them. You're altering them for preservation. Whereas if we talk about processed foods, that's when you start adding things like salt, sugar, or fats. So these are things that are usually made from 2 to 3 ingredients, and they can be eaten readily without further preparation. So if you think about cheese, for example, in order to make cheese, they usually have to add something like salt. Or if you talk about preserved olives, so brined olives, they might have some oil or salt to them. Bread, for example, has more than one ingredient. So it's not just flour. Sometimes it has salt, sometimes it has yeast, etc. So these are things that might have 2 to 3 ingredients and might have added salt, sugar, or fats. But highly or ultra processed foods, or those that take several steps to make, have multiple ingredients, and may include things like artificial colors or flavors. So those are your potato crisps or chips that have multiple ingredients and flavors that may be artificial, or your artificial sugar sweetened beverages, as examples. So the idea is to move towards eating mostly minimally processed plant-based foods. So that's why we call this a whole food plant-based way of eating, because we're eating whole foods as much as we can, and we're making sure that as much as possible that the food that we're eating comes from plants. And our focus is on the big groups of plant foods that we know have benefits for our health. So whole grains, legumes, beans, vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds. So the things that give us fiber, iron, calcium, magnesium, all the phytonutrients, the omega-3s, all the things that help nourish our bodies. So when we talk about a whole food plant-based way of eating, our idea, our goal is to eat less of the processed meals. So like you see on the left-hand part of the screen, maybe you've been having a sandwich that includes processed meats, or red meats, which have been known to have many detriments to your health. For example, they're associated with colon cancer or heart disease. Or you've been eating a sandwich that has refined and processed white bread, for example, or you've been eating something like French fries. So your sandwich with French fries, which has salt and fat and potentially other added chemicals if you buy them from a company that's been processing them and you don't make them yourself. Or you've been drinking sugar sweetened beverages that might have some colorants and some other additives. Or a dessert, for example, the one that you see in the image, then perhaps it has some artificial colors as well, or flavors. So the idea is to move from these foods like a sandwich with French fries and soft drink and a processed dessert, more towards eating something like a lunch on the screen on the right-hand side, which has a fresh salad with a variety of vegetables and herbs that have phytonutrients, maybe some beans that have tomatoes, and in this instance they have olive oil. This is more representative of a Mediterranean diet. These are actually pictures from Cyprus. And a whole grain like bulgur wheat. And instead of sugar sweetened beverages, you're drinking water. Or you've chosen a dessert that might be fresh whole foods. So you can see how the right-hand screen is less processed than the left-hand screen. And the idea is think about what you're eating every day and how can you incorporate some more items that are less processed. So on the screen before, we were showing you some examples of some meals. Here you can see some examples of what snacks might be when we focus on whole foods. So on the left-hand side, you see fruits. So instead of drinking that orange juice that has been processed, choose the whole orange itself. Or instead of drinking those sugar-sweetened beverages, choose water. Or if you want a snack, so instead of having that potato chips or crisps that come from a machine, or even a granola bar that's been processed, you might grab a fruit with some nuts or some seeds, or a homemade granola bar that you made that has whole grains, cinnamon, some nuts and seeds. So the idea is for your breakfast, lunch, dinner, for each one of your snacks, for your beverages, to think about which of those you would like to shift towards being less processed, to have foods that are more nourishing for your body. And we're going to talk about how you can do that in a moment. But here is one example of what that might mean for your day. So maybe for breakfast, you're having something like in the image where you can see it's a whole grain toast that has seeds and some avocado, tomatoes, and it has some spiced chickpeas plus some arugula. Or maybe you're having some oatmeal with fruits and some cinnamon and some added hemp seeds and chia seeds. Or for lunch, you're having a plate full of vegetables with a whole grain pasta, maybe, and some tofu or some beans like edamame. Or you're having some chickpeas with some whole grain pita and some salad and some fruit. And then for the snacks, maybe you're having hummus with some vegetables on top of that fruit that we already mentioned with those nuts. So the focus of your day is whole grains, legumes, vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds. So that's the first part of the session for today. Now we're moving towards the second part of the session where I'm going to share with you a couple of practical tips to help you move forward. So I mentioned and showed you before what a whole food plant-based plate might look like, but think about, what does your plate usually look like? So what did you have for lunch today, or breakfast, or what did you have for dinner last night? How did you divide your plate? Have you thought about how your plate is divided? If not, let's talk about it. So the idea is to try to fill half of your plate with fruits and vegetables. So that's why you can see the line here, the blue line that's from top to bottom on that yellow plate on the right hand side, that shows that the left hand side of that plate is full of fruits and vegetables. And if you look at the image, which is from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine on the left hand side, you see that they filled that left hand side of the plate with fruits and vegetables. A quarter of your plate is lean protein, whether that's legumes like beans or pulses, lentils, tofu, tempeh, and then the other quarter is whole grains. So that could be brown rice, it could be quinoa, it could be millet, it could be barley, it could be a whole grain pasta or whole grain bread. There's a whole variety of whole grains that you can choose from. And then you see that on the right hand side, you can see that the recommended beverage would be water. So think about, if you haven't done this before, how do you actually divide your plate? And I'll give you some examples of what a more nourishing plate might look like. So on the left-hand side, you can see an image of what you probably, some people, some of us have been eating. So let's say that your plate is full of, this is actually a picture from Cyprus as well, so French fries, bulguri, which is a bulgur wheat with tomatoes, and then a piece of meat. And if you try to cut it and see where are the vegetables on that plate, maybe you ate a salad before you ate this plate, but if you look at the plate itself, about 3/4 of it are full of grains that are, not all of them are whole grains, and more than a quarter is full of meat, which is full of saturated fat and can lead to heart, which eating too much saturated fat can lead to heart disease and can impact the way that your body handles glucose and lead to diabetes. So a more nourishing plate would look like that on the right-hand side, where half of your plate is full of fruits and vegetables, a quarter is full of lean protein, like the chickpeas on the plate in the middle and the tofu on the plate on the right, and then a quarter is full of a whole grain, like whole grain pasta or brown rice pasta, a whole grain pita, a brown rice, a red rice, a black rice. So think about how you can make your plate more nourishing by thinking about how you fill your plate. So perhaps you joined this webinar because you were already interested on the topic. Maybe you still want to learn a little bit more. Maybe you don't know where to start or how to start. So one of the ways that's been shown to make it easier for you to more effectively meet your goals of a healthy behavior change is to set something that's called SMART goals. So SMART is an acronym. That means that every letter in the word SMART stands for another word. You don't have to memorize what those words means, but it basically means that when you set a SMART goal, you want to set a goal that has enough detail that makes it easier for you to achieve it. So it says specifically what you're going to do, how many times you're going to do it. Do you have what it takes to do it? For example, if you're saying that you want to eat more greens, do you have greens in your refrigerator? Or do you say, if you're saying you want to exercise more, do you have free time in the lunch break to exercise? And then you want to be realistic. For example, if you are eating, if you're drinking 10 sugar sweetened beverages every day, it might be challenging to cut down to 0. So you want to try to make small realistic goals and move toward what your ultimate goal might be. And then you want to say how often you're doing it and how long you're doing it. And it's easier to think about a goal if you make a goal over the next week, let's say, as opposed to me saying, I want to eat 6 green vegetables every day, and I'm going to do it for the next 6 months. It's a lot harder to track how you're doing, to adjust any changes needed. If you make a long-term goal like 6 months, it's easier if you chunk it into smaller goals that might be 1 week long or 2 week long. So let me give you an example. If you say you want to eat healthier snacks, for example, That's a goal that could help you be healthier, but a more effective goal would have more detail. For example, I say I'm going to start on Monday, so exactly when I'm going to start. What am I going to do? I'm going to carry 2 fruit or vegetable snacks with me to work each work day for the next 1 week. So I'm giving myself a short enough time frame. I'm saying exactly what I'm going to do. And then at the end of that week, I can assess how it went. What barriers did I encounter? Were there any obstacles to me meeting my goal? And how can I adjust that goal in order to make sure that I can continue to move forward? Because it's not really about did you meet that goal? It's about perhaps did you meet it? And if not, what can you adjust? What can make it easier for you to continue to move your goals forward? And your goals might change from week to week. So think about how you can make your own SMART goal that has enough detail to make it more likely for you to meet it. Because the goal is progress, not perfection. And every little step in the right direction helps. If you're interested in the whole food plant-based diet, this is the type of thing that your doctor or dietitian can continue to help you with, because this is a long-term eating pattern that can help you be healthy. It can even help you reverse your diabetes, lower your blood pressure, help prevent heart disease, and your healthcare providers can be there to help you with it. In fact, they can many times help you with your SMART goals and follow how you're doing and give you some ideas of how to deal with any obstacles you're encountering. So in a moment, I'm going to check the chat box because we're almost done here. And I haven't seen any questions yet, but if you have a SMART goal that you're thinking that you might try, go ahead and write in the chat box. For example, my goal recently has been to make sure that I'm including greens in at least 2 out of 3 meals every day. And I've been trying that for the past, 2 weeks. So that might be a SMART goal. You might say, I want to include green vegetables in lunch and dinner every day for the next week. And I'm starting tomorrow. So think about what SMART goal you might want to try to make sure that you can word it in a way that's easier for you to achieve it, easier for you to track how you're doing, and easier to see any obstacles you might encounter. So we reached the end of the session for today. To summarize what we've talked about, we want to, when we're focusing on a whole food plant-based way of eating, we focus on foods that support your health, which include fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. And you can start small. Perhaps you've already dived into the whole food plant-based journey and you're 100% whole food plant-based. That is wonderful. Or maybe you are not there. This is the first time you've heard about it. If so, diving 100% in might feel a little bit daunting. So start with a small SMART goal, like we've mentioned. For example, you might want to say, I want to have 1 vegetable for lunch every day for the next 1 week, and I'm starting tomorrow. And then see how you're doing, track the obstacles that you've encountered, and go from there. So this first half of this hour has been the mini session number 1 about what is a whole food plant-based way of eating. There is a feedback form that I have put in the chat box for the event today. I'm going to see if I can put the link again, because I actually see that some people are writing in the chat box for me, which is wonderful. And so let me go ahead and put the link to today's feedback form in the chat box for you here. And I see some wonderful people have some questions. And while I look at the questions, please feel free to think about if there's one thing that you're going to be taking with you from today's mini session. Okay, so I'm going to be looking at the questions, and I just want to point out in about 2 minutes, we're going to stop this session and head over to the next one. So if I don't have a chance to answer your question now, I'm going to write it down and we'll go ahead and see if I can answer it by the next session, or if not, I can answer it in the chat box in a moment. But know that the next session is how do you actually set yourself up for success in your kitchen? Here are the resources and references for this presentation, which this video recording will be able to show you later. And I'm going to look at questions here. So let me just look at the chat box. Thank you all for joining this session today. And let me go ahead and look and see if the question that I can answer that I see in the chat box is one that I can handle in the next 1 minute, or if I'll have to address it later. Um, so, to the person who's been asking about their diabetes and their plaque, this is actually a great conversation to have with your healthcare professional. Because, in fact, they can help work with you to make sure that you're combining the carbohydrates that you need that can optimize your health. Because, in fact, whole grains, fruits, and vegetables can be a part of living with type 2 diabetes, but this is something that over time somebody has to help you adjust. You can look at the American College of Lifestyle Medicine for some references, and at the end of my presentation you'll see some. There are also many references you can look at online for whole food plant-based way of eating for type 2 diabetes. So thank you for asking that question. I'm going to move forward to the next session. Thank you all for joining me here, and I'm going to see you in the next one.